Welcome back to Stonehard Sports. We have our second mock draft today, mock 2.0, and it's going to be a 2-round mock draft. So, second mock is going to be 2 rounds here today. Just some prefaces before we go through. This is only going to be on YouTube. Again, I do have a podcast. It's on, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. That's kind of where I started, and I've been slowly doing YouTube stuff. And I'm doing a lot of mock drafts, not only on this channel, but also on another channel, Mathis NFL. Look it up. Doing a lot of stuff over there. I'm going to be recording one tomorrow, actually, as well. So, should be fun. Hopefully, some of you that were at that channel, Mathis NFL, have come over here to watch some of the videos. And if you are, I appreciate it. But, again, 2-round mock draft. There will be some trades. It's going to be a mix of, what I think the teams could do / if it's kind of close, it'll be like, okay, this is what I would do, or this is what I would think they should do. Some of them are rumor-based. Some of them are just, hey, I think this is the right player. It's not a big deal. Mocks are fun. And, again, there's a million ways that a mock draft should go. So not trying to predict absolutely everything, but just stuff that makes the most sense. And the first few picks are honestly pretty easy, at least the first one especially, and we are going to start off with number 1, and that is going to be Caleb Williams. Not too much of a question here. Yes, he obviously is not beloved in the eyes of the fans, but once he gets on the field and performs, nothing else is going to matter, I promise you. That's a guarantee. So, Caleb number 1, easy pick. Washington number 2, it's pretty much been between Drake May and Jaden Daniels. For this mock, I'm going to still go Drake May because I still think he is the second best quarterback, and I still think he's the right pick. Jaden Daniels would not be the wrong pick, not necessarily, but if I was drafting here, I just think Drake is just a little bit of a level above, and he's also much younger. I just think as a prospect, there's much more there with Drake than with Jaden. Number 3, there's been a lot of rumors about the Patriots potentially trading this pick and maybe just punting on quarterback till next year, which could be possible. But in this, there's so many teams that could trade up, and obviously we're looking at, maybe the Vikings do it, but also like the Raiders or maybe the Broncos could want to try and do it. Nothing's really set, so I'm not going to try and get ahead of the curve and predict the trade. I still think it's smart, even if you don't have the best cast around. It's much harder to find a franchise quarterback than it is, more receivers, more offensive linemen that you could potentially hit on later in the draft. So I think the smart thing, just take the quarterback here. He's worthy, I believe, of being in the top 3, and that is Jaden Daniels out of LSU. So that's our top 3 quarterbacks. And number 4, we're going to have another quarterback go. I think this trade could be either with the Cardinals or the Chargers. Really either one. Last mock we did the Chargers, so this mock we're going to try it out with the Cardinals. And it is going to be the Vikings. They've been rumored to trade up for a while now, and it's clearly going to be for a quarterback. In this trade, they would probably have to give up 11, 23, and maybe like 129, and maybe they get like 138 or 104 in return. We'll do 138. Maybe they might have to give up a future pick, potentially. But it's not a big deal. Well, it'll be something like this, where they probably have to give up the 2 firsts. So Minnesota's going to trade up, and they really, really want this player, and they want their franchise quarterback, and that's J.J. McCarthy. He's been skyrocketing up draft boards, partly just due to NFL teams and just personnel reportedly loving him. And it's, artificially boosting his stock. I definitely don't think he's worth the 4th pick, but it's a quarterback. They're valued way more. And, it just all signs seem to be pointing at Minnesota trading up and having their eyes on J.J. McCarthy. But we're just trying it out with Arizona, maybe, having them trade back down. And that's 4 quarterbacks in the first 4 picks. So then we have the Chargers here again. Could be trading down. Maybe this is where the Vikings go. But if it is not a trade down for either the Cardinals or the Chargers, I think it's going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. Just seems like the easy pick. Franchise wide receiver. pretty simple there. And then the Giants at 6. It's also these 3 picks. Chargers just take the best receiver. Giants take whoever they don't take, and that's most likely going to be Malik Neighbors. And then the Titans go ahead and get Joe Alt. So all of them just fit pretty basic needs. Chargers really need wide receiver. Giants also just need some good playmaker. They obviously lost Saquon, and that was their best offensive player. Receivers, they haven't had a ton. Neighbors is just a pure playmaker. And then Titans made a ton of offseason moves, still have a tackle on the other, or still have a hole on the other tackle side, and go ahead and get Joe Alt, the best franchise tackle in this draft. Pretty simple. Then at number 8, this has been Dallas Turner, and you would say, hey, okay, this is an easy pick as well. It's going to be Dallas Turner. Well, we're going to do something interesting. We are going to have a team trade back up who just traded back down. Yes, we're going to have the Cardinals trade back up into this pick. We obviously had them trade down and have trade to pick 11, and we're going to have them trade back up. They did this last year. Doesn't mean they're guaranteed to do it again, but I still think if they trade down, this is a realistic scenario where they could potentially still get a guy that they really, really want. Maybe they wouldn't have taken him at 4, but still wanted to get at least his position. So they would most likely have to give up pick number 11 and maybe like 66, and they could get like a late pick back or something like 143, and maybe they also have to give up like 129 or something like that that they just traded. And we are going to offer this trade. It's going to go through. And the Cardinals are back on the clock at number 8. And they are going to get one of the 3 wide receivers that are top 8 prospects in this draft. And that is maybe even higher, maybe top 7. And that is Rome Odunze. If they stay, obviously it's Marvin Harrison. But I still think this is good for them because they could trade up and still get one of the franchise wide receivers, because I think they really just need to snag at least one of them because they really desperately need the help. And then the Falcons, I think they can afford to trade back. They still obviously want one of the better defensive players on the board, and I still think they could get a top 2 defensive player at 11 while still gaining draft capital. So Falcons are going to trade down. Not a ton, but just slightly there. Bears at number 9, I think they should be with obviously already, I mean, it says wide receiver, and they could get one, but I don't think they should get one at 9. Even if Rome Odunze is there, I think they should just get the best defensive player, which luckily for them is still there, and that's Dallas Turner. Have another pass rusher alongside Montez Sweat. I think that's a smart idea there, so Bears are going to go Dallas Turner. Then we have the New York Jets. This is pretty much either Brock Bowers or Talisi Fuaga. Well, I think Talisi Fuaga is a smart pick. We're going to go a little interesting here and maybe say, hey, they're like, hey, we want to win right now. You just give me the best player right now. We just signed 2 tackles, which I still think tackles get injured, and Fuaga is an amazing tackle, and that would be a very good pick, and maybe that's what they do. But let's get a little interesting here. And we're going to have them go Brock Bowers, tight end out of Georgia. Give Aaron Rodgers another weapon. Obviously, they did sign Mike Williams. It is to a 1-year deal, and they do have, obviously, Garrett Wilson, who's a stud. Other than that, like Alan Lazard, he's kind of like a wide receiver 4, maybe. Really disappointed last year. So this is not really just a tight end. Again, it's more of a versatile weapon all around. And it'd be very interesting if the Jets can stay healthy, and he might be a very impactful player right away. Then we have the Falcons back on the clock at 11 after they traded down. Dallas Turner's obviously gone, but I still think there's a player that's worth taking at 11 that is of a similar caliber and plays the same position. That's Jared Verse off the edge at Florida State. They definitely need pass rushers, I feel. It really just did not get a whole lot of pressure, and they obviously lost like Calais Campbell. Cornerback is also a need, but I think you could get one later on in the draft. So let's go ahead and get Jared Verse there. Then we have the Broncos at 12. They've been rumored to maybe trade up. They're also like maybe a sneaky Brock Bowers team if Brock Bowers ends up falling. But in this state, I think it just makes too much sense right now, and I'd just be puzzled if they didn't grab this player in the first round. I guess they could get him in the second if he's available, but we're just going to go ahead and do it here, and that's Bo Nix at number 12. it fits. Sean Payton's worked with quarterbacks like this before. They really don't have a quarterback on roster, and they do have other needs, obviously. But Jarrett Stidham, is he going to really be your guy going in? They took a massive cap hit to get rid of Russ. I just think it's too high, yes, but it's a quarterback, again, like you know, and he's not a bad player. He's pretty solid. He is older. He doesn't have as high of a ceiling, but I still think it's someone that Sean Payton can win with and is fine with doing that with. So we'll go Bo Nix there. And then at 13, this could obviously be a cornerback, but we're also going to get interesting. I don't really want to have them just like trade back up into the first or whatever, and I don't think this player is falling to the second. He might. I just really don't see it. And that is going to be Michael Penix. Some people may think this is too high. Other people have mocked this, by the way. Daniel Jeremiah did mock Michael Penix to the Raiders at 13, where they didn't have to trade up. Maybe they do have to trade up. Maybe they don't. Really depends on the demand, but still, kind of similar to Bo Nix. They're quarterbacks, so they get pushed artificially up high, but Penix, I think, coming in immediately will probably be more talented and a better starter than O'Connell and Minshew. I know they paid Minshew a lot of money, but it's not like it's a fully guaranteed contract or anything. And he could obviously maybe sit a little bit in the beginning just to kind of get a hold of the offense and learn a lot of different stuff in the NFL. And I think this would be a pretty solid future plan for them. I definitely think he would play at least a good amount his rookie year. He is a little bit of an older prospect, so you don't want to sit him like, Jordan Love too long. If anything, that should be probably what I would want JJ to do, is sit the entire first season. But with Penix, very talented, obviously, great deep ball thrower, very good arm. Obviously, doesn't have a lot of other traits that you would love, and he is not the biggest guy in the world, not the most mobile, and has had injury history, but his deep ball is pretty phenomenal, and he's going to have some great receivers to be able to throw to. The Raiders have a pretty underrated receiving group, obviously with Devontae Adams, but Jacoby Myers had a great year as well. So a little bit weird, but we're going to have 5 quarterbacks go in the first 13 picks. Why not? Why not? Could happen. Then we got the Saints at 14. They are super excited. They're going to get Talisi Fuaga here. This is definitely his floor. I think he could easily go higher. I might take him at 10. But in the case where Brock Bowers goes, this is where he falls, and I think the Saints would love to have him at 14. The Colts at 15, they're going to go ahead and get the best cornerback on the board, and the most athletic, has the most production. Definitely my favorite corner, and I think is just going to be a stud. One of my favorite players in the draft. That's Quinion Mitchell. Obviously, Indianapolis loves their athletes, and Quinion Mitchell is a phenomenal athlete, and they do need corner. They signed their slot corner already, so they got that figured out. They definitely just need a boundary corner, though. Quinion Mitchell can come in and be a very good starter right away. Seattle at 16, we've been mocking this a lot. It just fits. Troy Fautanu out of Washington. He's probably going to play guard, not necessarily tackle, but he can play tackle. He's versatile, pretty athletic, especially for a guard/tackle, and stays in the state of Washington. Goes to Seattle. Makes perfect sense. Jags at 17, they are going to go ahead and go with Terrion Arnold. He is, I think, in my opinion, the second best corner. Could be the first. I prefer Mitchell, but Arnold's still very good. He's not as good of an athlete as Mitchell, but did have amazing production at Alabama, so he was going up against better competition. And Jaguars, who did lose, some secondary help, I think this would be a good and probably the ideal pick that Jacksonville wants to make. Then we have the Cincinnati Bengals at 18. Have a number of different ways they could go, but we're going to get a little bit interesting as well. There has been some potential trade rumors. Don't know if it'll happen. We recently just had a trade go down that maybe we didn't think would happen with Stephon Diggs, and I think maybe there could be a trade with T. Higgins. Not sure. They might pay him. They might not. And they haven't really – obviously the Bengals have seemed to prioritize a lot of their offensive playmakers. So we're going to go Brian Thomas. I think he's going to go higher than other people expect. He's not in the top 3, but he's almost in his own weird tier. He's like the top of the second tier for sure. And even if they get T. Higgins for this 1 year, they still could use another wide receiver 3. they don't really have a ton. The running game is going to fall off a little bit, obviously, because of Joe Mixon gone. This definitely could be tackles still. It might be the smarter pick, but Brian Thomas Jr., I think he's going to go a little bit higher, and maybe could end up – he's not the same mold as T. Higgins. He's a little bit faster, but he's not as built. But I still think would be a phenomenal receiver, obviously, with Joe Burrow throwing to him. So this is kind of predictive, maybe T. Higgins. Even then, he might be traded at the end of the year, and this is still a pick where you're like, wow, we got this stud. So Bengals go wide receiver. The Rams, they are going to need to fill the void that was left by Aaron Donald. So we are going to end up going with, I think, the best interior defensive lineman in the class, and that is Byron Murphy, a phenomenal pass rusher from the interior, going to try and attempt to even remotely replicate what Aaron Donald has done in his career. But I think with that void, it opened up a hole for them, and I think they should fill it with Byron Murphy. Then we have the Steelers at 20. Could go a number of different directions, but with tackles falling right now, at least a little bit, I think they're just going to snag one. Olu Fashanu, yes, that is how you pronounce it, out of Penn State, was projected to go higher at the start of the year. Didn't have like a bad year or anything. I think other guys just kind of jumped him. Still is a very good tackle prospect. Could go even higher than this. Maybe if, again, the thing with this draft is the tackles, the cornerbacks, and the wide receivers are all probably the best position / the deepest, and the quarterbacks are there too. So at least two of them are going to fall, especially with the quarterbacks, especially with the corners, the wide receivers, and the O-linemen. I think two of those positions end up going to be being taken higher, and one of them is going to end up falling. And in this mock, it might be the receivers or the tackles or corners. It's you obviously see, but in the NFL draft, we don't really know. But if you're the Steelers in this case and you have Fashanu on the board, I think you just kind of have to take him, even if you need also an interior guy. Tackle is still a big need as well, and tackle is just more valuable. So they go Olu, and that's the same reasoning for the Dolphins. They definitely need an interior, and they could go interior, but J.C. Latham is here, and I think you kind of have to take him as well. Austin Jackson is not extended at this moment. They have, Teron Armstead, who's 33 and missed a lot of games for them. So, and with these tackles falling, I think both of these teams are going to take advantage of it. And I say falling, they could definitely go in this range, but just with them being at 20 and 21, maybe they're a little bit better than that. But again, quarterbacks went, and they're going to push them down a little bit. And Byron Thomas Jr., that could be a tackle spot as well. So that's why they're available for them. So if it's not a tackle, maybe it's an interior offensive lineman. Then we have the Eagles at 22. We are going to have them go with Cooper DeJean. I think this fits really, really well. They definitely need secondary help, and he's kind of like a do-it-all corner. He can play slot. He can play safety. They kind of need a slot corner. A lot of their guys they have were kind of outside, and they had pretty poor tackling, so he's pretty much going to be a perfect corner for them. His medicals seemed good, so the reason he's picked lower in most mocks is just because of his medical history. So maybe he goes even higher than this, with that being all good now. But I still think he's a phenomenal weapon in the secondary, and Eagles are going to be very happy to get him there. The Cardinals at 23. We are going to have them go with a very not controversial prospect. Everyone knows he's amazing, but one that's just kind of been varied in terms of whether he's going to go super high or fall in the first. And I think that's going to be Leitu Latu. He's probably the best just pure talented pass rusher in this class. It's just he did have to medically retire from football, kind of similar to Jalen Phillips. And he had a phenomenal year, but injuries are a real concern. But I think if you are the Cardinals, you can afford to take that risk because, one, you just need talent on your team, anyways, like no question. And you have multiple first-round picks. So I think you can afford to do that. That's where Jalen Phillips a few years ago was Miami, because they had multiple first-round picks, and they could afford to do that. So I think this is just a realistic scenario for them if they are the team that ends up trading down and getting multiple firsts. Even maybe they could get it at, if they didn't trade down super far. Could get it maybe at either 27, obviously 23 here, but we traded down because they got another first-round pick, so they have 3. Even if they have 2, I still think they could take Laitu Latu here. At 24, the Dallas Cowboys, very similar to the Dolphins and Steelers. They do need interior, but tackle's super valuable. They could move other guys inside, like Tyler Smith, who's projected to play tackle right now. Go ahead and get a extremely talented tackle in Amarius Mims. He hasn't played a ton, so the sample size is not amazing, but Dallas does a phenomenal job developing tackles anyways. I think they can take a risk on a guy that hasn't proven himself as much. So Amarius Mims to Dallas. Then we have the Green Bay Packers. I've had this pick for a while. It just kind of makes sense. It just fits. Graham Barton, he's not going to be a tackle. He'll move inside to guard or center. They lost some interior offensive linemen. I think this just fits perfectly for them. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 26. They could go a number of different directions. One position and one just area. I think again, interior O-line is definitely an issue. But so this could be maybe, Jackson Powers-Johnson. But centers do tend to fall in the draft. I do think he's a first-round caliber player, but he might end up falling just because of where the draft goes, obviously. And tackles are just worth more than centers. But they also need some pass rushing help. And a guy who I think is rated a little too low that could be definitely a first-round pick is Chop Robinson. Chop Robinson, I definitely expect him to be in the first round. If he's not, he'll be one of the first 3 picks in the second round. Super, super talented pass rusher out of Penn State. And I think he's going to be a stud. I just think he's going to be very, very good. Amazing athlete. Just needs to be a little more consistent. But with the loss of Shaq Barrett, they don't have a ton of, just edge rushers, kind of rushing the passer. So they go ahead and get Chop Robinson there. Then we have the 3rd first-round pick for the Arizona Cardinals. And we're going to go a cornerback who has fallen just a little bit, and that's Nate Wiggins. They definitely need help at corner. Nate Wiggins, super fast. Did have relatively good production. Can sometimes be a little handsy, and apparently didn't have amazing interviews, so maybe that's kind of why he falls. But still a first-round caliber player, and Cardinals exit the first round with Nate Wiggins, Laitu Latu, and Rome Odunze. I think they'd be pretty happy with that haul. The Buffalo Bills, as I believe it was the day before I was recording this, they ended up trading Stephon Diggs. So that's that. They will not have a second-round pick in this year's draft, but have a second in next year's draft from Houston. But they have a hole at wide receiver, and there's a first-round caliber wide receiver that's kind of perfect at this spot, and that's Adonai Mitchell. He is going to try and replace the Diggs role. He's not the same player as Diggs. I think he's a little bit taller. So he is your Alpha X wide receiver, which I do think they need. He's athletic as well. Not super consistent, but I think he can end up growing with Josh Allen and might end up being a scary weapon there for the Bills. So Adonai Mitchell, they go ahead and grab him, and he goes to Buffalo. The Lions here, this could be a trade down spot if a team, like let's say one of the quarterbacks is still on the board. If a team wants to trade up and grab a quarterback, potentially like an AFC team, I think the Lions could be a spot to trade back because they don't necessarily desperately need a position right now. But one I still think they could upgrade, and I think it's worthy taking in the first round, is secondary. Even though they addressed it in free agency, I still think it's a need. And Kool-Aid McKinstry, I think, would be a very good pick for them at 29. He could help play boundary corner and doesn't have to start right away. He could still, come in extensive rotation because they did sign a good amount of corners. But we'll go ahead and get Kool-Aid to Detroit. Then we have the Baltimore Ravens. They have, obviously, whatever's going on with Zay Flowers. He's super talented. I love him. Rashad Bateman's fine. Kind of been disappointing in his career. He's projected wide receiver, too. They just need another wide receiver, I think. And with a very talented wide receiver on the board, at least in my opinion. One that's not going to bust at all. He might not be a superstar, but paired with, this offense in Baltimore and Lamar Jackson, I think he's going to be very reliable for them. And that's Ladd McConkey out of Georgia. I love this player. I really want him to go to the Panthers. I'm not sure he'll last that long. Even if he does, the Panthers did just get Deontay Johnson, who's kind of a similar player to Ladd McConkey, so maybe they won't draft him there. But In this case, they won't even be able to because I'm going to have him go in the first round to Baltimore. San Francisco at 31. They lost Eric Armstead, so they definitely need some interior help in the defensive line. So we'll go a guy who has fallen here, a good run defender, and that is Jazon Newton. Even if he doesn't fall this far, maybe they could still look at D-line, at least on the interior with the 31st pick, or just potentially grab a tackle. This could also be the case there. Then we have the Chiefs at 32. And this was a super hard pick. It was super hard. Obviously, wide receiver is a need, and I do think corner or secondary is a big need as well. But I think they could just get a wide receiver that might be relatively similar to the one that they could get at 32. They could just get him at 64. So I'm going to go a guy who I do think is a borderline first-round caliber tackle, one that is not as raw as Tyler Guyton, and that is going to be Jordan Morgan. He's a primary pass blocker, which obviously they tend to pass a lot, so I think they would appreciate that. But they definitely still need some tackle help, and I think Jordan Morgan would be a nice veteran, quote-unquote veteran rookie. He'll be an older player, but he was not going to look like a rookie. I'll tell you that. I think he'll be able to step in. He may not be a superstar, but he's going to be a consistent player for them. And, maybe it's a receiver. Obviously, I just think they could get one maybe a little lower. And they could be Xavier Worthy for sure, but they already got Marquise Brown. You're kind of drafting a very similar player. I just don't think that's smart in terms of building out a good roster, having the same exact type of wide receiver as your wide receiver 2 and 3. Not really ideal. So, and Rashee Rice, he might get suspended, obviously. So they definitely will draft a wide receiver probably with their at least first 2 picks. He's more of a slot. So they need a full-on outside guy, and that's not really what Worthy is. And then we start the second round. The Carolina Panthers, I'm going to have them going in the secondary. They ended up, obviously receivers have been the big thing that people are like, no, they need to get a receiver. They just traded for one in Deontay Johnson. I think it's a very good trade for them. They definitely will probably still take one, but I think with cornerback still being a need, and J.C. Horn is there, super talented, just is hurt all the time, go ahead and draft a corner, and there's a lot of guys that you could take. I think the best one out of here, though, is the guy at the top, and that's T.J. Tampa out of Iowa State. Consistent, not really talked about a ton. I think he's kind of underrated corner. Tested pretty well, looks pretty good on tape. I think he's just going to be a good, solid CB number 2. And that's what Carolina needs, just good, solid players. So T.J. Tampa out of Iowa State, going to be the first pick in the second round. Then we're going to have the Patriots here at 34. They could also go a number of different directions. I'm going to have them go with a guy who's been rising up the boards, and the Titans might end up trading up for this player. I saw this in a mock that they had, but the Patriots are going to snag him here, and that's Darius Robinson, a pass rusher who might end up sneaking into the first round. I really wanted to put him in the first round somewhere. It just didn't fit in this mock, but this could be him instead of Chop Robinson, who potentially you could just switch these 2 picks. He tested very, very well athletically, and obviously that tends to push up players. So Darius Robinson as an edge rusher might end up going higher, but he'll go to the Patriots here. At 35, the Arizona Cardinals. We are going to have them take Jackson Powers-Johnson. They'd be super excited if he falls here to 35. They could maybe want to trade back up and get him, but I didn't want to give them 4 first-round picks. So maybe if they don't trade down with the Minnesota Vikings, they had used their second first-round pick. Maybe they trade up and still end up having 3 firsts just in 3 different spots, and they take Jackson Powers-Johnson if he's still available. Then we have 36 with Washington. We are going to have them go offensive line. They definitely need some help there. Not my favorite guy. He might be in the first round just due to his athletic talent. And that's Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma. Again, Washington needs to help their offensive line. It's gotten help on the interior with some signings they had, but tackle side still needs some help. Tyler Guyton going to be the pick here. 37, the Chargers. They definitely could have taken Tyler Guyton here, but they need some help on the interior. Zach Frazier, pretty much your ideal second-round center out of West Virginia, consistent, played a ton in his career, a mauler, and I know that John Harbaugh is definitely going to want someone like that. He might not start immediately. If he does, it might be at center or guard. I believe they signed Bradley Bozeman potentially to play on the interior, so maybe he'll swap time with him, but going to have him go to the Chargers. Then we have the Tennessee Titans at 38. They could also go a number of different directions. Receiver, I don't think would be something they take here in the second round just because they signed a ton of money to already go ahead and grab Calvin Ridley. Just drafted an offensive lineman. Edge rusher, they could. I just don't think it's worth it at this pick. So we're looking at defensive back, and they definitely need some center help. So we're going to go ahead and go Tyler Nubin, the just best safety in the class. Not first-round caliber, but we're in second round. So I think this is around where he'll go. Anyways, he's your prototypical drop-back safety. They don't really have a ton of those right now. They obviously traded their best safety last year. So go ahead, reset the clock there at safety. Then at 39, the Carolina Panthers. This is going to be a receiver. Could be a number of different guys. A lot of these guys are kind of in a similar just ranking system, and I'm going to go an interesting one. I had seen this, and I kind of agreed. It could be Troy Franklin. I'm not a huge fan of Troy Franklin, so I'll stay away from him now. Could be Keon Coleman as a bigger receiver, but they did just draft Jonathan Mingo last year. They're going to give him another season. But let's go Ricky Pearsall. Just a pure playmaker, not like your prototypical X wide receiver, but he can play on the outside and in the slot. Was very productive at Florida when he got time to play, and he's got some of the most sure hands, which they definitely need. So just get a guy who can catch the ball, good player. Again, these two guys might not have the highest potential in the world, but they're just very good players. They're going to be playing immediately, like they can start right now. So go ahead and do that. Help out Bryce Young. And we're going to get Ricky Pearsall for Carolina. Then at 40, we got Washington again. This could be a number of different positions as well, but their secondary needs a lot of help. So let's go a guy who's been projected in the first round a little bit. He's kind of all over the place with his rankings, but we'll have him slot in here. And that's Ennis Rakestraw Jr. Very good in zone, very, very good in zone, and a pretty good tackler, but has had some issues in man as well, which is a little bit weird. So maybe he'll help back at safety as well, but he'll probably be more on the boundary, playing potentially a zone, which Dan Quinn, we'll see what defenses he runs, but sometimes he does zone blitzes, so we'll go ahead and get Ennis Rakestraw Jr., and obviously he could try and improve his ability to just stay with his man consistently. Then we have the Packers at 41. Also, kind of an interesting pick here. There is one guy on my mind, I think, that I want to have them take at linebacker, and that's Edrin Cooper. Out of A&M, Peyton Wilson obviously is right there, and they could definitely take him, but I think the Packers tend to get, more so athletes at linebacker, and Cooper is a phenomenal athlete. He's also younger, so I think he fits their timeline a little bit more. They have a very young roster, so they need linebacker help. We'll get Edrin Cooper for them at A&M. Then we have the Houston Texans. For Houston, again, also could go a number of different directions. This is their first pick in this draft. Receiver, they just got Diggs. They don't really need a wide receiver. Cornerback could definitely be corner. They did grab a good amount of corners in free agency. Could be linebacker, but they don't have this listed, but I do think they could grab it, and that's offensive line. Offensive line, I think they could definitely address, and we're going to go with Kingsley Suamataia out of BYU. More of a developmental player, but I think he could put on a little bit just extra weight, and he would be a stud. He's already pretty athletic as it is, and I think with the Houston Texans, their O-line is good, but Laramie Tunsil, there's not really a ton next to him. And interior, they have a lot of interior guys trying to fit that other tackle spot. So go ahead and get an offensive lineman. I think the best one on the board is Kingsley Suamataia at BYU. Atlanta, they need a slot corner. For sure, need a slot corner. I don't think you could have Mike Hughes as your main slot corner. And the best slot corner available is Mike Sainstril. So let's go with him, or Sanristil. I looked up how to pronounce it, and I can't remember how to pronounce it. Sanristil. somewhere like that. Out of Michigan, they had obviously a ton of amazing players that are going to be coming into this draft. Or I say amazing, they're kind of good. Like, some of them might end up being studs, but I think a lot of them are just going to be like good, solid players in the NFL. Out of Michigan, they'll have a ton of guys picked, and Mike is the best slot corner on the board right now because a lot of them went ahead. So we'll go with him to Atlanta. Then we're going to have the Raiders. I'm going to go Peyton Wilson. He just seems like a Raider player, like just super tough, gritty. I absolutely love him. He's amazing. I watched almost every single game of his. He was phenomenal. And they definitely need some linebacker help over there with the Raiders. So we're going to have them go with Peyton Wilson in the second round. He's going lower just because he's older and because he's had injury history, but he did play the entire year this year. And apparently his medicals are checking out good, so that's a good sign there. Then we're going to go to New Orleans at 45. And we went with tackle here, but I think we could potentially also look at a wide receiver. So I think we're going to go ahead and go Troy Franklin. He's bigger. They need a little bit of a bigger wide receiver. He's kind of just your general wide receiver too. Nothing stands out, but he's solid. And, they have Chris Olave, and then, there are a lot of slot guys they have, but no one that's really like, okay, this is our for sure wide receiver too. It's kind of been rotating, so go ahead and get Troy Franklin there. The Colts, they love their athletes, and this athlete fell, so they're going to go ahead and grab him, and that's Xavier Worthy out of Texas. A Zoomer, obviously, ended up breaking the record for the 40-yard dash. Complete stud there. He's not obviously as polished as other receivers, but it's not like just your John Ross who was super fast and sucked. Like, he was pretty good. He still obviously needs refining with his route running, but still a good player. So Colts get their two major athletes for Indianapolis. Then we have the Giants at 47. I still think they need secondary help. I know they addressed it in the draft last year, but I don't think it hurts to get at least one more. Because you do have Jalen Mills who could play safety or could play nickel, but we're gonna go with one of my. I kind of think he's a little bit underrated, and he might end up falling this far. But it's Kamari Lassiter out of Georgia. Just had very good production. Was more of just an outside corner, which they kind of need that. And I think with him along with Deonte Banks, who picked it up a little bit at the end of the season, this might be a very promising young secondary core for the Giants. So Kamari Lassiter, I do like that pick at 47. 48 with Jacksonville. Could be a number of different positions. I really went back and forth on this one. But at the same time, it's also like you say, hey, there could be so many, but it's also like there's only so many that they would take because they're like, no, they don't need this, they don't need that. I do think, though, it would be smart for them to boost up on the offensive line, and with obviously a lot of offensive line have been going, but let's go ahead and get he had great production, still shouldn't start right away, but we're gonna go ahead and go with the product out of Yale, Kieran Amajide. I believe that's how you pronounce it. I'm probably totally butchering that. Amajide, something like that. Was amazing at Yale. Again, it's Yale, so it's kind of hard to really fully take in, like, okay, what can he do? But he still has great measurables, so that checks out. But I don't think should start right away, again, which he won't need to. But I do think their offensive line interior could definitely be worked on, but I think some guys they have maybe playing tackle could move in, and guys I believe like Cam Robinson is only there for like one more year and is not really your he's fine, but he's not really like, yes, this is a very good tackle. So I think it'd be smart to get an offensive lineman. The Bengals here at 49, they could have gone O-line here, but looking after, obviously losing DJ Reader, they could use another guy, especially on the defensive interior, and we'll go Braden Fisk out of Florida State. Balanced run defender and pass. He probably will come in and start right away. He's I believe 22 or so. So kind of in the middle of needs to still develop, but still could start. He probably won't have a ton of production immediately, but maybe over time, I think he can end up being a good interior defensive lineman for them. Then we have the Eagles at number 50, and I'm going to go with an interesting one. This one I really like. I think they could go wide receiver here, and a wide receiver down the board that I really, really like and I think is sneaky is Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky. This is like a baby Debo, basically. He's purely in the slot, which they need. They don't really, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, they're not really slot receivers. They signed Devontae Parker. He's not a real slot receiver, and I think would be better as like a rotational guy on the outside, not really a pure wide receiver 3 playing the whole time. And Corley is a stud. He's very good. I think he's totally underrated in this class. I absolutely love him out of Western Kentucky. Again, kind of like a baby Debo mold. You're going to be able to give him the rock even on end-around runs. So I think this is a very some people might say it's a reach, but I think we're going to look back and think, oh, he definitely could have gone higher than this. So Eagles were getting a little crazy. They're going to Malachi Corley at 50. 51, the Steelers. I definitely think, looking at their roster, they need wide receiver. Kind of similar with the Panthers, with them trading. They traded for Dante Jackson, and they traded away Deontay Johnson. Each of them should draft what they traded away. So in this case, for them, it is going to be wide receiver. And we're going to have them going Roman Wilson out of Michigan. Kind of another like mystery player. Like, he was good and everything, and it's kind of weird that he's not projected to go higher in a lot of different places, but they definitely need wide receiver. They have Van Jefferson, I believe, as like their projected wide receiver 2. Not it. Roman can play on the slot and on the outside, so Roman Wilson to the Steelers. Then we have the Rams at 52. Could be their offense seems honestly fine. I don't know if they really need to address offense with their first 2 picks. Maybe O-line, but in this mock, O-line went pretty high. So there is a relative O-line that you could take here at 52, but just looking at the board, I think a guy that maybe they could end up taking that I think is going to be sneaky good as well, that I could definitely see the Rams being like, yeah, we don't care, we'll just grab him. That's Marshawn Kneeland out of Western Michigan. I think they definitely need some more pass rushing help. They run a 3-4, so they're going to be kind of like hybrid linebackers rushing off the edge, and that's what Marshawn Kneeland can do. And he had amazing production at Western Michigan. Maybe needs to still sit a little bit, but I think could be a very nice player in the future. And similar to Malachi Corley, just a guy, again, maybe a little higher than they might go, but just a guy that I really, really like. So we'll have them going 52 to the Rams. Then at 53, we got Philly again, and they also have a number of different positions they could go with as well. But in terms of just their roster, a big hole that I see with us already getting defensive back and wide receiver, with them having 2 second-round picks, they could trade one of them for like a ready-now player. I didn't do that in this mock, but that's just throwing it out there. That could be something they do. But we're going to go Junior Colson out of Michigan. I do think he's worth taking in the second round. He's more of a coverage linebacker, which they definitely need. They did sign Devin White, but he's been not as good the past few years and is more of like a run blocker or run defender / blitzer. Colson can stay back. They kind of got torched over the middle, so hopefully he can help them out. Maybe not immediately, but at least somewhere along his first season. Then we have the Browns. They would have loved to get any of these linebackers, but even Colson they could have taken, but in this mock he goes right ahead of them. So instead, we're going to have them focus on the interior of the defensive line, and that's another Michigan player. Again, a lot of these Michigan players going high, and that's Chris Jenkins out of Michigan. Kind of like, again, good at pass rushing and run blocking. They tried to fill a lot of their interior defensive line with just kind of stopgap players. So when you do that, I think it's an ideal place to go ahead and draft a rookie. Again, could be too high, but there's not really any. I mean, they could go Ruke, but I kind of prefer Chris, so we'll take him at 54. 55, the Dolphins. I think they are definitely going to go a position they probably need, and that's tight end. They could wait. I do like Ben Sinnott. I think he's very good, but we'll go ahead and have them take Jatavion Sanders out of Texas. Some people like him as a first-round pick. I don't think he's a first-round pick. He won't be. But as a second-round pick, this is probably right exactly where he's going to go. Good receiver, a little bit. I think Brock Bowers is obviously better in every facet, but Sanders is still an amazing athlete, and I think would fit in perfectly with, obviously, Miami, who loves their athletes. So we'll get Sanders there for the Dolphins, another weapon. The Dallas Cowboys, we are going to have them go with a running back. We're going to go with a running back because I think that their running back position is obviously horrendous. They might bring Zeke back. They could do that, but I think maybe this isn't it's not my number one running back. It's definitely my number 2 running back, but he's more of a, hey, 3 down back, like we just need to use you. If we're going to bring back Zeke, which hypothetically, if they do that, I think Brooks could try and take the Tony Pollard role. So we're going to go with Jonathan Brooks, keep him in the state of Texas, and have him go to the Dallas Cowboys. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers look at that, and they're like, okay, we need to get one too, because I don't think Rachaad White is a guy who we could just go into next year with super confident in. And they're going to go with Jalen Wright, and who I think is the best running back in this class, purely just due to his receiving ability is phenomenal, but he can still be a 3 down back. He won't need to be because Rice is there, or because Rachaad White is there. But I think Brooks might just fit what Dallas wants to do more, and maybe they're intrigued by, the Texas bias in terms of him staying in Texas. But 2 running backs. The running back class hasn't really been talked about enough, but I do think both of these guys are pretty good. And obviously you have like Blake Corum, who some are high on, some are lower on. I still think he's good. I don't think he'll go in the second round. He should be a 3rd round pick. But there's also a few other guys that we can go in and maybe later in a mock draft that might be good, like Isaac Orendo, very underrated running back. I would love to get any team that has him. Frank Gore Jr. I love as well. So some running backs down the board that might be solid, but these are the only 2 we're going to have go in the second round here. But read up on these guys. You'd want to know some of the rookie running backs that are coming in because they produce immediately, and this is a spot where each team probably needs to take a running back, and I think they're both worth taking in the second round. So that's these 2 picks. Then we have Green Bay. They obviously just recently drafted Adrian Cooper. Then we get an O-line for them. They still need secondary safety on the board. They obviously end up losing one of their safeties. Tried to relatively replace it. They didn't get a superstar or anything. So let's go ahead. Maybe go with a guy that's a little bit better than the safety we had just taken, Tyler Nubin. And that is Javon Bullard. He can play safety. He might also play slot corner as well. Very good in coverage. Just throw him in the back. They need a safety back there. So Javon Bullard to the Packers. Then we have the Texans again at 59. And we had said that obviously cornerbacks they tried to address. I still think this is a spot where they could take one. And I think Kyrie Jackson is here, but I do think there's a player down here that is better than him, maybe 2. But we'll take at least one of them, a guy who's been rising up the board, and that's Max Melton out of Rutgers University. Very scrappy, a guy that they would, I think, love to add. They tried to address it with, I believe they signed C.J. Henderson, Jeff Okudah. I wouldn't have both of those guys going in and having, 2 of them be your starters. So bring Max Melton in. He'll bring a ton of competition and might end up being a sneaky starter for them throughout the year. Buffalo at 60. I'm going to have them go a player that now they did just sign tackle. They signed, I believe, Orlando Brown when I'm recording this, but he's been injury prone. It's only 1 year. That doesn't stop you from taking this position. But I'm going to go a player down the board. I don't know why he's rated so low on PFF, but I think he could definitely be a very sneaky second-round pick who's been rising up the boards, maybe an early 3rd, and that is Roger Rosengarten out of Washington. Very athletic, much more athletic than a lot of people ended up thinking. Production was okay, but I still think with him being able to go to Buffalo, it almost makes more sense now because they could sit him for 1 year and he could play in rotation, and then he could come in and start. They have Spencer Brown there, but he's not really signed past 2024, and they don't have a ton of depth. So Roger Rosengarten, I think this is, again, some of these I like to have reaches, but also they make sense. So Rosengarten to the Bills at 60. 61 for Detroit. We're going to go with a pass rusher that has fallen down the board. Maybe he doesn't get this far, but in this case, he just has ended up falling with other guys taking different positions, and that's Chris Braswell out of Bama. I think he's fine. He's solid. Nothing to me, at least, like insane. So that's kind of why I think, at least maybe it's just my thinking since I'm making all the picks of like, oh, this guy maybe has higher potential, or maybe they pick him. He could easily go here, and maybe Marshawn Nealon falls and goes to Detroit. Could easily switch it, but in this case, we'll just stick with what it is. 62, the Baltimore Ravens. We are, obviously they had wide receiver. Still, it's kind of like they don't really need a ton of needs, but at the same time, they do. But either way, we're going to have them go with an interior offensive lineman, one that's kind of just settling like late second, early third. But we'll just have them grab him here at guard, and that's Christian Haynes out of UConn. Kind of similar to the West Virginia center that we had taken earlier in Zach Frazier. Played a good amount, consistent, just good pick for them at 62. 63, about to wrap up this draft with the 49ers. I think tackles are potentially going to go off the board pretty high, and there might not be, obviously, according to these rankings, be a tackle that's worth taking, but I still think he might sneak into the second round with his combine, and that's Patrick Paul out of Houston. Pretty good pass blocker, not the most agile, so he's going to have to play in a position where he's not going to be able to move a ton, so maybe they might bring him in not as just a full-time right tackle, but he could trade places with Colton McKivitz, who plays tackle for them, and Paul could be more of a, if you're doing a drop back pass, you put Paul in. If you're trying to do play action, maybe McKivitz comes in, something like that, and maybe he could end up getting a little bit faster, more agile through training, and maybe end up being at some point your future right tackle. And then at 64, the last pick of the second round, it's got to be wide receiver since they did not go with one earlier. And we got, the two Washington guys here. Xavier Legette, who has fallen, at least in this class, but might go a little bit higher, might go a little bit lower. We don't really know. He's kind of like a weird case. Brendan Rice, some people really like as well. Tez Walker's there. I'm not really a big fan of Tez Walker. Jermaine Burton's also kind of just like, he's just like, no one talks about him. He's just kind of like there. He could be a second-round pick. I don't think he will. But we'll go with a guy who's, I think, consensusly just is rated higher than all these guys, and that's Keon Coleman out of Florida State. He's more of a big body, go up and get it wide receiver, which, again, is not really something they have. And for, Mahomes' case, if he just needs a time where he's on the run, throws it up, and Kelsey's not open because maybe he is getting old, so not as athletic, injured, this is a player that could try and fill that role in Keon Coleman, who is much faster than people think. His 40 time was not amazing, but he has recorded speeds of like 20-plus miles an hour in the game. So not sure what the issue was at the combine, but he's been recorded way faster than he was at the combine. So maybe this is the combine pushing him down, and he ends up being a very good player, but still young. We'll go with Keon Coleman out of Florida State. And that is our 2-round mock draft. We're going to be doing another mock draft before the draft actually starts. Maybe 1 or 2, depends on my schedule and what I have going on. But this is the 2-round mock draft. You can pause at any point to see what your team picked and who you got in total. And that is going to be it for me. So hope you guys enjoyed. Stay smart, stay sharp, and I will see you guys later. Peace.